Good evening, everyone, and welcome to M.A.D.D. And this one is like a precursor to our major biggies, which is the bristle. And we have today, like I said, so coming back, I was explaining to Nari and Sandeep sir and one the concept of the sofa. Sofa is uninterrupted 120 seconds. So we kick off, and Lloyd, like always, we come to you to start. Lloyd, if you can hear me, please take off.
I can hear you. Thanks, Giraj. Interesting to learn about the sofa concept. I mean, it's the closest that one comes to a couch, but we won't get there. Kind of dangerous territory. But very quickly, Giraj, I think possibly I haven't really grasped the subject well enough. But my understanding of what we're about to discuss today is really the fact that what it takes for a brand to be true to itself, right? Is that what because something about the phraseology of the title was not very clear. So you just want to just spend a minute telling us about it a little bit?
No, this, like I said, is a precursor, Lloyd, to the bristle thing, which is where we are looking at brand in sync. So what actually gets a brand in sync? And what will qualify for a brand to be considered to be in sync with the consumer, with the environment, with society at large? What attributes should we look at, which will be able to tell us that whether this brand qualifies to be considered to be in sync or not to be in sync?
Okay, great. Thanks, Grant. So I think it's, relevance is great in today's context. But what I would like to start with saying that before a brand, gets in sync with its consumer, I think it's the basic objective is to question its entire existence and what its entire purpose is in the context of what it does. All right. And traditionally, I think a lot of us have understood that the objective of a business is really about wealth maximization or shareholder wealth maximization. I think what is really emerging these days right now, and possibly rightly so, early days yet, is whether shareholder wealth maximization is the be all and end all to business. Right. And today there's a lot of views, including from the large private equity spaces, that good businesses generally have to go a little beyond shareholder wealth maximization, and saying that that's not the purpose of a good business, that effectively is the outcome for good business. And therefore, what it takes for a brand to really be in sync or a business to really be in sync with its consumer is to build a much larger relationship beyond just the commercial motive, right? So value for money is one thing that consumers will always buy, but increasingly consumers are looking for rationale and let's say attributes that go beyond just the price value equation in a manner of speaking. And therefore, for a brand to really be in sync with the consumer, it has to understand what its consumers' need is, not just in terms of what the brand satisfies, but also the consumer's larger perspective or larger values in life. So it's really about building a lot more values into the brand that go outside its physical attributes or physical, in a sense, emotional attributes. Which is why businesses and brands that now are being expected by younger consumers to take a stand on issues or to, in a sense, speak out where they stand on things that possibly go beyond just the core of what their category or their category promises. I think that issue it's very early days yet, but I think it's slowly emerging. And a large part of why it's emerging is the fact that today consumers have a much bigger voice as they shape a brand. There's a time that it was a largely one-way process, right? Companies and brands communicated to consumers. And of course, they had a little feedback cell. So people wrote back about issues, cribs, and such like. Today, with an empowered world, almost anyone can take on a large corporation, right? So one, Insta post and one Twitter post fired away can actually gain traction. And therefore, brands are walking on glass, walking on, on kind of, a minefield. But at the same time, that does not restrict them from being very antiseptic and neutral. You can't look the other way when a lot of your consumers are facing distress issues. And we've seen a lot of recent issues, the Black Lives Matters in the US, and maybe issues domestically as well. So I think, therefore, today there's a much bigger need for brands to look beyond their category, look beyond their physical purpose and price value equation, but to look at, in a sense, the larger, environment they live and operate in, and that process is something that is evolving. And I think today's marketeers and business people are still struggling to come to terms, to cope with it and come to terms. And therefore, in the context of what is being planned in terms of a brand in sync awards, I think it's now more than ever that's relevant. And also to look at this whole concept of being in sync with your consumers in a slightly larger pullback and look at it from a slight distance, as opposed to kind of whether it's just just meeting everyday objectives. I think that, to my mind, is my take from this entire concept. But obviously, we'll throw it open and get everyone's.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Lloyd. And before we, so we'll get to the second person on sofa, and which is Nari Sag. Nari, over to you. Your 120 seconds now.
Thank you. And I'll try and match that articulation. Okay. Now, Giraj, I sent you a slide. Would you put that on the share screen?
Just one second. I'll just search because I was off my mail. I'll try and just with that. You can
It
carry
went
on
about,
speaking meanwhile.
1 minute before I came in. So
just trying to. Why don't you carry on, and I'll just, the moment I'm able to fetch it, I'll put it.
Yeah, I think I sum up. I completely agree. Purpose is veritably now the fifth P to the marketing mix with equal salience, and Lloyd has just articulated it rather well. Now, I don't know how many of you saw Giraj's incoming mail about connectedness, responsiveness, aligned. As three other additional attributes that is being hypothesized as a set of things to consider in the whole brand in sync context as well. Now, what I've done is that I have put this in some sort of a simple framework, and I suggest two changes. One is, I think trust has to explicitly come in, especially post-COVID. And especially given Indian situation, where Indian situation automatically implies high growths. High growths implies completely new users coming into a category, which implies they absolutely have no clue about what really to really expect. And it behoves the marketeers to build an element of trust. I mean, real trust, not perceived stuff. To build that as a conscientious marketer.
Nari, just to interrupt, sorry, just a second. Giraj has started screen sharing, but your screen is not being visible, Giraj. You haven't opened that slide. Sorry.
Yeah.
क्या हुआ?
वो screen आया नहीं.
नहीं आएगा, ठीक है, no sweat.
नहीं, वो started screen sharing के बाद आया नहीं. मतलब Giraj, we are still
Giraj,
seeing.
you have to go to the PowerPoint. You have to open it's a PowerPoint one slide.
Yeah, no, I have the slide, but there is some issues here.
You need to select share and then go on to that slide, no?
Yeah.
No, I know that.
But then.
You know what? I have never mastered this. On Zoom,
no, this is something else.
It always defeats me.
Just one sec. Just one sec.
So, which is why I requested.
Maybe you can just add it to the chat and send it to everybody. And if it's
no, I'll try and share it. Just one sec. Just
the chat may aa sakta hai ye? Can it come?
Yeah. It says your screen sharing is paused for some reason. It puts it on and then it stops.
Okay, I'll try.
I'll give you the right.
Host has disabled participant screen sharing.
Yeah, I've done that.
You're not enabled?
I've enabled.
Okay.
This reminds me of that damn projector that never used to work whenever the critical presentation was.
Absolutely.
Now, what should I click on this?
You click on screen share.
Okay.
First, you open the slide, then you click on screen share.
The slide.
We can see it.
Yeah, we can see it.
Done it.
Okay. So there you are. Okay. So now purpose is here. You can see purpose. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, purpose is here. Now, what I've done is that, in sync is with the changing consumer, with the changing context, and the changing ways of making money. I'm calling it commerce, but it's the way you make money is changing. All three are under change, and connected. Always been an important point to have a consumer connection. But right now, it's the avatar of connection that seems to be really, really relevant is community. Particularly because the second one, which I'm calling digital first instead of calling it responsive. People talk about experience, people talk about digital, people talk about responsive. They are all the same thing. Ultimately, it means, do you have, as let's say a soap marketer, or as a completely non-experience based category, let's say oldest category, steel or cement or whatever. Do you have a digital vision? And do you have a vision for today's context where it's digital first, creating experiences that can enable the consumers really get much better value from the dealings with you? So I'm putting this as digital, which I'm suggesting, community, trust, and digital. And the third part is on the whole distribution and the connection with the consumer in the actual transaction is also undergoing fairly massive changes. I mean, now it's now fairly common that people are buying FMCGs through e-commerce. It's fairly common that there is now direct to consumer is now a thing on moving forward. So given this disintermediation, which unlocks value, so which can be passed on to consumer, which can be passed on to shareholder, wherever. Are you aligned with the way money is getting made? That's where I'm parking aligned as an idea in with the commercial context. So I would say that yes, you need purpose, absolutely. Trust, I would put trust first than purpose in here. Because one of the things about purpose is also that it's a very developed world notion on purpose. For the developed world, people are less important than baby animals. Yeah. Now, so for them, when you say environment, the first thing that comes to them is nature. It comes to them is some spotted owl is getting clobbered. Yeah. Now, whereas here, the first guy who gets clobbered is the forest dweller. The first guy who gets clobbered is the fisherman, and not the fish or the whale. So therefore, purpose to some extent is a developed world idea. But the fact is that the climate change affects all of us equally. Inequality bugs us, all of us equally. So to have a stance against these has now become important, simply because many of the companies, big companies here are global, be it Amazon at 70,000 crores, who knew Amazon 70,000 crores, or whoever, and they have enormous power. They can make things happen. They can do things. I mean, Amazon offered to deliver vaccinations using their guides. So we are talking about enormous power, and that power has to be put to a better purpose than just making money for the chief shareholder. Yeah. So I would say trust. I would say purpose. Absolutely. Aligned to the way commerce is flowing. Third. Fourth, community. Community is now a given. I mean, it's now for the last 10, 12 years. I think people are striving to build communities, not just connections with the customers. And now, after COVID, digital transformation, where it's everything is digital, you reimagine yourself with a range of digital interactive strategies, forming the base for the brand, for the brand thinking. So that's how I see this specifically. Therefore, I would say add trust and digital rather than connected and responsive, and make it community and purpose. So broadly, this is what I see as the framework for this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Just a few clarifications. We'll come back to those clarifications later, but because I think it's important, otherwise this point will get missed. One is that in the 15 categories that we have identified, there are certain very specific digital-only categories.
Okay.
So, and therefore, it was also important, and Lloyd and Chitra have been a part of that entire process, along with Sanjeev, where we were trying to sort of identify categories. We have taken certain categories specifically for the digital footprint that they have. And in that category, all digital entities are being clubbed together as one category. Whereas the brick and mortar categories, are also relevant, even though, when we were doing the list, the lockdown and the COVID thing, the pandemic thing was still hovering around in the manner in which it was at its peak. Yet we felt that the brick and mortar guys can still stay in sync, can still stay connected, and let them not, at least for this year, not compete with the guys who have a very strong digital footprint. So that's the reason why we looked at that. And we have other attributes also. So, but the trust and the community points that you raise are fantastic. I think we will have to look at them and incorporate those. Uh, and I'll open what you've said to everybody's viewpoint. But the third person on sofa is Shekhar. Shekhar, if you can unmute and start off. Shekhar, are you there?
Yeah, I am here.
Yeah. So please, your 120 seconds begin now.
Okay. Yeah. Uh, from what I've gathered on the agenda, I thought and I'm going to be fairly traditional and orthodox about the whole thing. Uh, in addition to what Nari just mentioned, of course, but then Nari went about a little ahead and was in sync with today's times rather when he talked about digital, etc. So, what I would like to say is the good old tested mechanisms where I feel the most important and fundamental thing about a brand, it cannot be very cocky. It needs to be emotional at the very base. Emotional connect is the main thing that will keep a brand in sync, irrespective of location or a geography or culture or whatever. It would have to necessarily be emotion, and it has to be a compelling engagement with the customer. It has to move along with the customer to build that brand story. It cannot be doing things in isolation, because a brand purpose is not something that is made to make the brand look good. It needs to have a larger objective in the marketplace. It needs, like what Lloyd said, that it needs to go beyond commerce. And that's that's where I think the brand takes a more pedestalistic position and says that this is how I think my brand has to register with you. It has to resonate with you. You have to have that communion with the customer is critical. I personally feel that brand in sync is more about emotion and being okay. You talk about when I think about such brands, I think about a McDonald's or a Nike or an Amul or Tata Tea or Dove. Now, these are brands which have taken that positions which go beyond their product line itself. I feel that they have dealt with emotion in a very graceful manner and decided that I am not here to decide whether the consumer is a moron or not. I'm here to make the consumer feel that I'm in it for his experience as good as it is mine. This is what I want to convey.
All right, fair. That was like a summary of our vision, Shekhar. Wonderful. All right, so we done the sofa, guys. So now I go to Johan to give his perspective, because Johan, you bring in a perspective which I think a lot of us today, have moved beyond. And as a consumer yourself, and as an observant consumer yourself, I'm sure you have a lot to add value to.
Yeah, thank you for the kind words. I actually want to say that I think the idea of purpose that Lloyd shared, I think we have covered that quite consistently, and now we cannot deny it, I guess. And the way I was explaining this to someone the other day, 9 years of somewhat, we saw more behavioral shifts in 2020 than we've seen in 9 years before that, I feel sometimes. In fact, I feel like some of these rules, I just don't even know if I can refer to playbooks before 2019. And where that comes down to is suddenly brands who weren't thinking of some things in a very short period of time are having to think of things like community and culture and and I don't even know if mean, that's going to be a challenge for some more traditional organizations, because the more digital ones are so designed for change. So they're moving at a very fast rate. Well, today I was watching an ad yesterday by Asian Paints. When the first time the ad ended with "Buy Asian Paints Purifier" on Google, and it had the Google thing there, and you can see that they're having to shift. So what I see is going to happen is that, obviously, from the more physical parts of any brand, they're going to have to sit down and think about these other pieces that are not as easy to establish, or places that they didn't think through. Community is a great aspect. Lloyd mentioned that really well. It's always been a one-way dialogue. Now slowly they're going to have to think about, how does the brand interact in a peer manner about who you are. The thing about purpose is probably going to be one of the more important ones. While I don't think it's yet as important, it's just more occupies more space time or news time on our timelines, but there's still that aspect, but it's going to increasingly become more important. And so people are going to be they're going to care about where their products are made. They're going to care about what the cost of the workers are. Slowly Pepsi and Coca-Cola and these larger brands, how their factories are treating people is going to become more important with the younger consumer. The other day, again, had someone come to me, and basically tell me, I'm never buying from H&M again because I saw a news report. And I think that's slowly, I'm hearing that chit and chatter more. So that's where I am actually quite curious to see what happens on those parts. The other shift which we're also going to have to think through is diversity is going to play a big role in the next decade. Diversity is now slowly, again, we're not adapted for it, right? A lot of it, our hiring practices are systemically a certain way. And so suddenly, when the Black Lives Matter movement happened, when the diversity thing happened, most brands, even some of your very woke brands, were like, we have no idea what to do now. Like, where do we go from here? And so we're going to start to look at how many women and how many women on the board, how many diverse races on the board, and that's going to become more important. I think these are the areas that's going to be tougher for traditional organizations, and that's what's going to start to make a sense. I mean, if you think about it, for how many years we've been looking at Fair and Lovely and wondering how they get away with it, and then it took 2020 to happen. And if you think about it, that for years we've been the younger generation has been coming out and saying, listen, you're propagating very deep systemic issues in a household level in India, and it took 1 year for that to come down. So I'm actually very interested to see how organizations that are more traditional are able to solve for that, and solve quickly. Some of the more digital brands, I think the other parts are going to be very, very important. The digital brands are obviously a lot more, may I say, risk friendly. They were almost built in this new generation, and so I'm seeing them adapt much more quickly. But yeah, I think that Lloyd really stole some of my words in how he approached it, because suddenly shareholder maximization is not the end and all. And I think that's what we're going to see a lot more focus on. And so even we, as our extended community, are getting a lot more requests for community consulting, and community marketing and community management, which there doesn't exist a lot of playbooks for. So just adding to what Lloyd said, I think that's where my perspective is shifting to as well.
All right, fair. That I'll now go to there's one point that Sandeep. I'll go to Sandeep now, and Sandeep, there's one point that Nari had mentioned about about digital presence, and he mentioned cement specifically. So when you were heading the cement company, what kind of digital presence did you have, and did it actually matter? And how would you respond to that, and then to the entire bigger piece that we've talked about?
Digital presence is coming about in every category, and cement initially they were probably it's a very sleeping category, traditional category. Nobody thought about it, but I think in the last 2 or 3 years there has been a lot of catching up which has happened. I wouldn't call it still a leapfrogging, but I think they are realizing that you cannot avoid digital. I don't want to get into why, because there is a lot of other factors, how you reach to the end consumer, how you connect with them, and all those things are becoming important. And digital is the most effective way to get there. So it's coming in over there. So stealing another, I won't take up my 120 seconds, but I couldn't resist. Whenever I hear emotional connect, I'm always reminded of this anecdote, and I thought it may be, we were launching Hindustan Times in Bombay, and our target was to do 1 lakh copies on day one. And we had this very stalwart or veteran circulation manager of the group, Rakesh Sharma. So he was asked to make a presentation on how he would proposes to make this 1 lakh. So he said, no, it's very simple. We have about 5,000 individuals in Bombay who do not ask what paper is delivered to them. Whatever the newspaper wala gives, they take it. So that he cited Amitabh Bachchan and Mukesh Ambani, etc. He said 5,000 will come that way. Another 10,000 will come from corporates, because all these corporates, they take everything. And another 5,000 I'll easily sell from the stands, because people seeing a new paper will pick it up. So we said, where will the balance 20,000 come from? He said, that'll come through eConnect. So initially we thought, again, he was talking those days of digital, etc., eConnect. So we said, what's eConnect, Rakesh? He said, emotional connect. So we said, what do you mean by emotional connect? He said, all the Punjabis in Bombay, they have this emotional connect with Hindustan Times. All of them will pick up. So that was how he was basing his 80,000 sale figure out of 1 lakh through emotional connect. So I was reminded of that. That's a minor aside. And so I always quote this to whenever in a sales thing to my people. Coming back, I think there has been Lloyd, Nari, and Johan, all of you, they've made very, very sophisticated and very sharp presentations and concept. I am not a blue-blooded marketing person. I've not an MBA, I've not done any of that. So I don't know. I like to go back to the basics. And one thing I find very useful is this Hofstede model. I think that really gives me the picture of this whole sync process. And that's something I use in my very elementary way whenever I look at this whole sync, etc., which you are talking about. I don't know, everybody would be familiar with Hofstede here, but the core is obviously the value. And then you get on to, from the core, you get on to the rituals, which we are talking about in terms of what is done. Then comes the persona of the brand, and which you really try to compare. And finally is the external manifestations of it in terms of your symbols, etc. That's how it goes through. Now, having said that, I think the one contradiction which we have today, and Lloyd touched upon it, this, whether you call it the shareholder value maximization or the connect, there is a bit of a dissonance today between the real consumer who is actually buying your brand and very often to whom the brand is trying to speak to, because those have become slightly dissociated. So if there is somebody is launching a new thing, they are more concerned with what the investor is going to think, or the PE firms which are going to put in money going to think, and they are really conscious of that, and therefore they play to that gallery rather than what the brand intrinsically needs. And so if you see a particular product, I'm saying that product could be digital, whatever form, if you and I as traditional marketeers were to look at that product, if somebody came to us for a brand strategy and we were purely looking at it from a product standpoint, like we would in our earlier days, we would probably recommend a certain strategy. But these guys are not really interested in that. They are, trying to create, like we were discussing last time at the IPL issue. Brands come, brands go, and they make this huge spend, and which has got no relation to cricket, no relation to any sport for that matter, but they just want big bangs and the eyeballs, and they go away. So are they really sinking? And I would be slightly a contrarian to even talk of Fair and Lovely. Okay, there is a Fair and Lovely was, there was a whole political aspect, a political correctness of it, etc., and the woke generation and people. But again, going back, it's a bit like this whole M.A.D.D concept. If you really see the people who are buying Fair and Lovely, they couldn't care less as to what you're calling it and why anything else. So it's like people say M.A.D.D shouldn't be saying this, and we get offended. But M.A.D.D sticks to his brand and speaks to the consumers he wants to. To some extent, Fair and Lovely was like that. Now, they have reacted in this situation and come up with a new name, which, if you ask me, I don't think it really reflects the character of that brand or the personality of that brand. It's neither here nor there. Now, HLL may still manage to sell it through their distribution cloud, but I have a suspicion that they may be losing the franchise of Fair and Lovely over a period of time because of this huge, confusion they have today in the. So these are factors. I don't know how far we will. I think we need to be mindful of this while really seeing choosing these brands in terms of the categories. That is my one thought. I think that's a filter or a caution or a rider we need to keep in mind.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks, Sandeep. And I would go on to Chitra just joining us back. I'll go on to Chitra and to Harish because they both represent two categories which are now struggling to get into in sync. So both of them work for print, the newspaper industry, which is now, if there's some industry which is threatened by this onslaught of the digital world, it's print. While I see Chitra having adopted very well with a podcast and the way Hindu Business Line today is more active on the social media platforms than ever before. Harish is heading a paper which is the largest vernacular paper in the country, and they have struggle of being in sync, or they don't have. We'll check that out with Harish. So before that, one point that I'm so tempted to one anecdote that I'm so tempted to share because of what Sandeep said. I go back in my career when we used to, Sanjeev and I were working on Onida brand. There was a sub brand we launched which was called KY Series, which was a very elitist, state of the art product in those times, most expensive television in the market, and we spent almost 50% of our entire marketing budget on promoting that model. While that was happening, our manufacturing guys had developed a local chassis, which was a much cheaper, a fighter kind of a model. Now, our sales guys were in love with that fighter model because it was simpler to sell. The trade was very happy with it. And what happened is we continued to market the elitism of Onida, and these guys kept pushing that fighter model. And you know what happened? And that actually impacted the brand in a big way because the guys we were talking to were not the guys who were buying our product, and the guys who were buying our product were not the guys we were talking. And we realized it much later in the day that collectively we've actually done damage. And therefore, I think if you go back and look at InSync, and that's what perhaps we have to look at, and that's what you mentioned also, that maybe with Fair and Lovely, what has happened is that they've now taken into account the objections of people who never went and bought a Fair and Lovely, and that's pushed them to change, and therefore they're losing their basic constituency. And on the comment on Modi, we'll come back and debate that later. I can't let you go without a debate on that, Sandeep sir. Yeah, Harish. So,
Nari wanted to say something. I think Nari wanted to say. My own thing is that the Fair and Lovely, by merely renaming it, has just diminished themselves. They had a real opportunity to withdraw the damn thing from the market and be aligned to a larger purpose of equality and new values in terms of how people are seen.
Yeah, but
renaming is just complete.
No, but Nari, I think the point there is some merit in what Sandeep said. Even though I'm sure Johan will chew me for breakfast next time he sees me. But there's one very relevant point that he raised, that the guys that you responded to by changing the name were not the guys who were buying your product. They were not perhaps your constituency. And for your constituency, what you have done is you've now suddenly out of sync because the constituency today does not know what you are. You're a confused brand. And I think in academically, let's limit ourselves to just that and come back and reevaluate.
Nari, only thing is, I will add, having been in that company and in that business, no chairman, CEO can afford to take Fair and Lovely off because of the impact it has on the bottom line. It is one of the most profitable brand, and if they want to take it out even for a quarter, from share prices to bottom line, everything would have taken a huge hit.
Completely agree. Completely
nobody
agree.
really
COVID,
provided that cushion where he would not have been faulted for the loss or for the loss in volume, but leverage it for a very sustained gain going forward in a changing marketplace. The market has changed. I think they're being silly in what they have done.
All right, we'll come back to that. Harish, okay. So print, sitting on top of the entire pyramid and being the largest sold paper in the country, and there is this entire digital thing that happened, and in the initial days of lockdown, you were not even able to reach your paper to your target audience, and they started reading in shots, and and there was enough time for them to have got habituated to reading, to getting the news from either television or from in shots. And then you guys came back. So what has been the experience, and how are you?
Just remind me, you are Bhaskar or Jagran?
Bhaskar.
Dainik Bhaskar.
And that's why Harish. That's why Harish reads your post, sir, because you publish it in his rival paper in Patrika.
Okay, so first thing first, we are not only the largest in India, we are the third largest in the world.
Oh my God.
Wow.
And so you have to understand that the history tells us from USA to India, the largest have always survived. It is the smallest which will get merged or shall be bought back by bigger players. And hence, our future is not saddened by rise of digital anywhere.
Wow.
And the good news is that unlike in metro, we have bounced back faster in our markets. We are today operating at around 90-95% of pre-COVID numbers that we had on circulation. And even these 5% or 10% variation wherever we have is largely due to some of the educational institutions, some of the commercial institutions have yet to open fully, and some routes are still disturbed. So we have not shifted a major shift in our readership from print to digital yet. As an organization, are we focusing on digital? Yes. We want to be there. I think there won't be any company in the world which doesn't want to ride on that boat, because this is a wave which you can't avoid. You'll have to be part of it. Having said that, when you are talking of sync, I think the sync has to be what Lloyd mentioned, what Chandrasekhar mentioned. I think one beyond emotional connect is also, maybe it is a part of it. You have to be ethical connect also. Are you a brand which is ethically conducting itself? And does your consumer also believes that your ethics are in place? I think this is one of the biggest things which brand marketers must keep in mind. So when you say ethics, recently there was one German soap brand which said that we have come out with the pH level 5, which is good for the skin, whereas Hindustan liver brands are at far ahead of pH level and they're not good for skins. HLL took them to the court and they lost the case. Now, I really started question marking myself. What is it, a company which is in India for so long, how it is conducting itself? And why would they do so? Okay, maybe you can gain certain time, certain years of profits, but when you will lose very badly. I think that's one thing we have to keep in mind, that brand must always be ethical to its end consumer or to its audience, whatever it is. The second point which I want to really insist is what Giraj mentioned, that, and because I was in sales that when he was in marketing and deciding all the marketing for us. So while he was advertising for certain target audience and we were selling to somebody else. Now this is a total mismatch of marketing and sales coordination, and also lack of ground connect in the marketing about what's happening actually in the field. The sales field never decided on the price points. It was decided by the
in those days, the so-called head office. Lloyd also endorsed that. So head office will decide what they will produce, and sales has to sell that. Now, whatever you are deciding there at the top, I have never come across any studies, at least I was never asked in my 12 years career in UNIDA. So what is it that is happening in the ground that you wish us to know? In fact, I would always today say, when I look back at the career, maybe the top team was a top team and we were like cousin brothers, like, nobody asked you, who the hell are you? So I think that relevance has become very important nowadays. With the so much of social media, with so much of communication, those days are also, we were not having enough communication. The only tool those days was either I call or I send a letter. And if you have to make some points, you have to send a letter. And I will send a letter today, it will deliver 3 days later. And then whether you are there in the office or not, whether you are traveling, once you come back, you will read, you will reply. So maybe those were the days. Maybe we did that, we did that mistakes those days. Maybe we didn't realize that what is the importance of that kind of a ground connect. Coming today, if you talk of today, if you are not connected with what's happening in the ground, if you're not ethical, no amount of shareholder value you can create, no amount of emotional messages that you may create will have any effect on the end consumer. So to me, the two most significant things that a brand marketer or a brand should keep in mind is what is their level of information, what's happening in their ground, what is their ground report, and second, how ethical they are in conducting themselves. To me, because this is a world of communication. Here you do something, it's as we are talking, I have all the information on my app, what's happening in Ajmer, what's happening in Udaipur, what's happening, any major news comes on my app and there's a message, oh, this has happened in Udaipur, this has happened in Ajmer. Imagine the kind of communication is happening. So those days are gone. So the brand really connected to its field force, which really knows the pulse of the market. And that is the best thing you can create, and best, I would say, trust you can build first within your organization, the people who are at the front, and then with the consumer. Because I think the trust has to come within the organization first. Does your frontline person really trust you in what you're saying? Does he stand for your values that you are talking of? Does he also believes equally strong? Oh yes, my company stands for this, or the values are only for the advertising? I mean, these are the things I think today matter a lot in today's time. So that's it from my side.
Thanks, Harish. I come back to Chitra. Chitra, in sync print brand, wanting a foot here in the digital space as well. So what has been your learnings, and where do you think we are heading? And what all should we then, the context is that what should we then pick up and put that as a criterion for evaluating brands, whether they're in sync or not?
Yeah, hi everyone. So yeah, it's a bit, but it's still a bit of a learning curve, I would say, for the print brands, because especially during the pandemic, when we saw that a lot of a lot of circulation dropped because people stopped buying papers, and then a lot of the people who stopped buying newspapers didn't come back. So clearly, they found alternatives, and clearly because we are not that much in sync with them, that we've not become like, you cannot, miss out on, we are not offering something that you cannot do without. Otherwise, people would have come back to print, for instance, our circulation dropped and then we're still struggling to get it all back. Then what do? You do digital, everything, but you do want print to remain there, right? And how do you be in sync? So I think print media for a while tried to do events, tried to do webinars, tried to do whatever, to be in sync. We've tried everything, and it's a content battle actually. from long form to short form to smaller stories. We've been experimenting so much in the newsroom. You know, there's one section which says that people can't read anything longer than 120 characters, so keep the stories short. Then at the same time, there are others who've shown that long form does have an audience. So I mean, experimentation is key to being in sync. You have to keep experimenting and I mean, see what is picking up, what is going out, and based on that. So and digital does offer you data, and algorithms are there telling you. So every day we scrutinize which story got read and which story got a conversion to subscription for print. And so for business line, we did this whole exercise during the pandemic, and what we found was the market stories actually got the maximum conversions to print, so or conversions to subscriptions. So the stories which we're talking about, market movement, shares, stocks, analysis, etc., resulted in people buying our subscription. So then a conscious decision was taken that our market seems to be the stock market oriented one, so let's stick to our strength and play it on that. So I think it's very, today there are a lot of tools that we are getting where we can figure out what our customer wants and then be in sync with what the customer wants. So that's an important learning. And brands, I mean, brands across categories have to do that. They have to constantly keep studying because the market is evolving so fast, so quickly. Take food. I mean, rice and wheat used to be staple flours, but now people want alternatives, millet, this, that. But who's been in sync with seeing that demand? It's startups, not the big brands. Only now the Ashirvads of the world have woken up and started coming out with millet mixes and things like that. So I think you have to really understand what your customer wants, how the customer behavior is changing, and then quickly meet that demand or the expectation. So that's one level. On a broader perspective, I think Lloyd and Lloyd, Johan, Sandeep, everyone summed it up so well. Nari's presentation was brilliant. So there's not much to add to it. Except one small point I wanted to add about leadership. A lot of time in the olden days, we never bothered about who was leading a company or who were the promoters of the company, I mean, except for the Tatas or the Birlas or whatever. You never really thought, but today's consumer actually is looking at each company judgmentally. So, a Tesla is very in sync because Elon Musk has this personality, and I mean, there are companies where the CEOs are so talking and interacting with you. I think I saw a survey somewhere that brands that are more connected are where the leaders are actually interacting with you. They're putting out videos, being on LinkedIn and sharing their thoughts with you. Immediately you, the customer, feel in sync. I mean, don't we all feel so much in sync with Anand Mahindra? So
yeah, but Chetan, that came up. I mean, so, that came up in our, we sent link to everybody who's in the jury and who's on the MAD council, and this point specifically came up under one of the headings. So, and that is a point that we're going to be considering, which I'll share with you once everybody's had a chance to speak up.
Okay, so leadership and people, and also then also people are looking at, okay, I mean, people are looking at who are the promoters. For instance, Fortune, during this whole debate with where Saurav had the heart problem. Correct. And I mean, there was so much of trolling. It may not have got trolled so much if the Adanis were not the promoters of the brand, right? I mean, I think that was a factor. Otherwise, they may have been, although the brand did everything right. But yeah, so who are the people associated with it? All those things.
Yeah, they're coming to play. That actually matters. Yes, absolutely. And it shows up in our entire thing also.
Correct. And then, of course, I mean, doing good has been one of the strongest connectors, right from, I mean, why Tatas have so much brand equity in India, right from start, their philanthropy is what has led to the, Tata name being equated with, I mean, there's that whole thing which has stuck into our psyche. And I mean, we just think that Tatas always do good, right? So, I mean, So those are all broad factors.
All right. Lloyd wants to say something, and before I go to Lloyd, one small thing, Chitra, what you said. Even though I'm a believer in what Kafra talked about branding, where it says go where the people are, and numbers will follow. But some of the brands that we all worship, some of the brands which are cult, have never done that. They've stood out on their own, and they've said to hell with the world and to hell with all of you. This is what I have, and that's the way it is. And those brands are have really gone and done so well and become a cult brand. So and I'm saying this even though I believe in what Kefir said, go where the people are, numbers will follow. So it doesn't work all the time. I think that element somewhere we'll have to consider. Lloyd, over to you.
Just a small point reacting to what Harish and Chitra said, and I kind of agree with them. I think one key element of the whole In Sync awards that we're talking about is the ability of brands to be agile and to pivot. And Johan mentioned it, in a sense that just like there are digital natives, right? Kids who are born, let's say, 2025, for whom it's a digital first world. There are a lot of brands which are digital first brands. All the new age brands, the Ubers, Olas, Oyos. Now, for them, change is very easy because they've literally come into the internet age, and everything is about jump. You can keep changing on the fly as you go. A lot of us on this group, on the other hand, and some people resonate with this, who started our careers in the 90s or 80s or whatever, you were never going to put something in the market until you're very sure about it. Now, I think a big element of the In Sync is brands that have reinvented themselves and are now in a position to be as agile and can pivot their business models to suit the changing consumer. And I'll just talk of three brief examples. One, I think, is Microsoft, pretty much an 80s brand, puts in the internet age, but they've, in the last 10 years, reinvented themselves. They've almost gone entirely cloud. They don't depend on physical sales of, selling licenses. Now it's Office 365 and so on. Great example. Another of an individual that, all of us, respect, admire, and know of, almost chameleon-like, he's moved is Mr. Bachchan, right? From an 8-star to rediscovering KBC, trying his hand at business at ABCL, and now slowly moving into this kind of thought leadership. And he's kind of fitted every personality. I mean, he was close to, let's say, the ruling elite of the 80s, and then briefly his family, kind of flirted with the Samajwadi Party, and now people almost see him as a right-winger, right? But someone who's reinvented and morphed and kept himself relevant well into his 70s. I mean, two, in a sense, classic examples. And the last, again, politically possibly explosive, is Reliance Industries, kind of old world company, petroleum, and they suddenly telecom, now retail. So I think a big part of In Sync is really understanding companies and brands that have the ability to change with the changing consumer and still carry great commercial relevance, right? And for me, Microsoft, Reliance, and Mr. Bachchan himself all personify this. There is a lot of old world legacy brands struggle. They're still flat-footed in this digital first world, right? So an Amazon and an Uber and a Tesla are going in a certain place, and some of the old world brands are still rumbling around and saying, okay, time to change. Can we do digital transformation? I think that's one key element that we should keep in this whole award thing, and I think that's important.
That's a valid point. I think agility is one thing that is the new buzzword any which ways, and we need to sort of look at that. It defines that. I'll come to Sanjay, who's been very quiet, and I always come to Sanjay towards the end of our thing because Sanjay speaks like a Buddhist. He's never very excited. He's not that he's not enthusiastic, but he's extremely balanced. Sanjay, over to you, and your style of summing it up.
Zen.
And then, of course, Vivek. Welcome, Vivek. Vivek has joined us. I'll come to Vivek after I go to Johan. Johan wants to make a point. Vivek, welcome.
Thank you, Giraj. Thank you. Thank you. So sorry about being late.
No, I can understand. It must be the 16th or the 17th hole that would have got you stuck.
19th maybe. Okay.
All right. Okay.
All right. Hi, Vivek. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Thanks, Giraj. Those words were obviously not directed at me. I was looking around to see who it was. But anyway, a lot of things have already been said. And I do agree with a bit about what Harish said about brands having to be transparent and honest with the consumers. But I think one point which no one has mentioned here, and I think it's just a progression of much of the thoughts, is that we all talk about brands being in sync and doing things which are emotionally connecting with the consumer and therefore having their back. But the biggest test of a brand being in sync is whether the consumer has your back, which means that at a time when you're falling, does the consumer actually rise you or take you and hold you and, provide that shield. So I'll give you one example of a community which does it for a brand in the technology space, which is OnePlus, a brand which is just about 8 years old. And I think its lifeblood is its community. And the fact that they have been, consistently in the 25 to 30% market share in India in the premium smartphone category, just shows that what kind of a strength that is, where your community has your back for everything that you're doing when you have a Samsung, when you have an Apple, or whichever other brands that you have in the space. But it is the community which drives the brand forward. And that's the real example. The other example perhaps would be, I think, I was about to mention Mr. Bachchan, and Lloyd has already done that, in terms of the ability to, pick up the man when he was down in the dumps and give him a new lease of life, and then continue to do so wherever he goes. But the other real brand that I would look at in terms of real life brand that in our times we have seen in the last 10 years is Uber, where Uber, when it launched, it completely changed our lives in terms of how we look at mobility and transportation. And for a brief time when Uber was banned in Delhi, and it was both the driver community as well as the consumer community which actually pushed the government to relook at the whole decision and bring it back. And that's been happening all around the world, whether it's London, LA, and other places where they have got into trouble. But you become such a strong force in the lives of the consumer that the consumer really, gives its everything to back you up. And that is really when the brand knows that it's in sync with consumers. So I don't want to take more time on this, but I think much of the other things which have been said are pretty relevant. But here was one point that, rather than the brands doing what the consumer does, or where the consumer is, it's about the consumer, giving it back to you in terms of the kind of support that you need when you need it the most.
All right. Thanks, Sanjay. I think that's a wonderful point. And a lot of other good points have been raised, but I think I must also express the difficulty that Sanjeev and I have been having with Ridhima and Sushita and the two guys who are working with us, is that a lot of these things that you've said were relevant, are relevant, will always be relevant, but it's very difficult to map. It's very difficult to map. We are not doing any consumer dipstick or whatever. And even if we do a consumer dipstick, that's going to be grossly unfair. And so we are now trying to confine ourselves to things which are measurable, where we can actually track evidence, and rather than pick up a whole lot of things on which the judgment is more subjective. And I'll share the final grid which has come out, which has been filtered, and you guys can react to that. But before that, Johan wanted to say something, and then I'll come to Ashu.
I just wanted to add, I mean, Sandeep made a point about Fair and Lovely. And actually, Girat thought I'd come at his throat, but I actually want to explain why I actually enjoy his thinking. One mistake we make is we assume we are the audience. And we as marketers and advertisers make very strong opinions, even though we actually are never going to walk into a shop and purchase that product. Correct. And as we are commenting on brands in sync, we do need to put ourselves in the question of the audience who is actually going to purchase and wonder, is it in sync with them? Because we're just the people with the loudest voices. And it's easy for us to be in this place of, I guess, some privilege of having Twitter and having followers, having influence, assume that we are also able to fully understand that. But for us to truly understand, for example, the cement company, someone mentioned it, I am so it's not credible to comment on cement companies being in sync unless I step into the shoes of the person who's going to purchase and wonder, how does this impact them? And then map out the growing trends of of purchasing and consumer behavior. So I was just resonating with what Sandeep said, actually, because I also have to check myself to understand that, hey, I'm not the audience here. Now, their actual audience, what does it mean to be in sync with them? So that kind of adds as a filter, because sometimes I feel like we can wrongly assume that we are there.
Johan, you just shaken the entire citadel built on influencer marketing and
I know, I understand.
Actually shaken that.
I need to balance that out a little bit.
That's shaking. That shaking is about to collapse. Anyway, but that's Johan, a valid point, and I think that's something that we need to also. What you say is bang on. That people who have the strongest opinion, are they actually they're actually, are they the consumers, or do they have any hold over the actual consumer? It's like a lot of people who criticize Mr. Modi. Of course, a lot of people in this group do not. They think that a lot of things that he's doing are illogical, but like Sandeep mentioned, he has a very large constituency, and to them it doesn't matter. To them, what matters is what he's saying and doing, and that's what matters to them. You and I mean, I can't say you and I can go crazy criticizing and ripping him apart or whatever, but absolutely, we are in a complete minority. Nobody gives a damn beyond a point. So
Yeah,
what you said is right, but I think that's a good point that you make, and we will have to look at that, because it actually shakes the entire thing of influencer marketing, that the entire digital piece is being built on. Ashu, your comments.
I also
before
wanted
we
to
share.
say something.
Yes, Sandeep sir, please.
No, don't call me sir. You make me put me under the back foot immediately.
No, I've been calling you sir ever since you moved to Nilgiri. Because that's an aspiration that we had, and
Okay.
So
Except
hills envy, plain guys. Hill guys pride, plain guys envy.
okay. No, Johan, what I was saying is that's where our very, very traditional classical model of the brand personality comes in. I personally feel that, even within the fair and lovely category, the fairness category, if you were to really get into, which is Ashu's and others thing, personality thing, you will find very clearly that comes through. And if we are not cognizant of that or attentive to that, that's where you will miss the thing. There's no harm in you and me commenting on, even say something about Modi. We are all entitled to comment, but we have to be clear on what is the brand persona.
Correct.
Okay, and why are we saying there is I shouldn't be taking political examples, but why we think Rahul Gandhi is not in sync with the people he ought to be targeting, as opposed to the people whom he is speaking to. It is that dissonance. That's where the persona factor comes in. Sorry, Nari, your turn.
No, Ashu's.
No, I just had a quick comment on Johan's point. This is a real issue, yeah. But the fact is that we are here in our expertise in interpreting evidence, not in emulating the audience.
Correct.
So therefore, it is entirely a matter of what is the quality of evidence that we have. I mean, if the Malcolm Baldrige Quality Award asks the applicants to fill in all the information. So if you're going to get the evidence, even if not from consumers, but if you're going to get factual evidence comparable for across the brands, the whole idea of this group is to exercise their judgment rather than try and second guess the consumer's mind. So I think that there's a fundamental difference in the process.
That's the objective. Nari, very well put. That's the objective.
Yeah. So on that only, I was saying that it should have some evidence. So in our metrics, I didn't see growth as a way to evaluate also that, has the brand grown over the years? Are we not using that as a yardstick to gauge whether the brand is in sync? Because then that also takes into account that is the relevant target audience, moving with it or not. And we are not judging it basis our subjectivity. The other two things I did not see, or maybe it's covered somewhere, is innovation and creativity. So we are talking about purpose, we're talking about all of that. So where is that going to be plugged in? Under what head? And has the brand innovated enough, or done all of that? Is also something I think we need to plug in somewhere.
Wonderful. Just to update you, Ashu, we debated a hell of a lot, and and Sanjeev and I were a divided house on the market share and the market growth performances. It's still subject to discussion. We will come back after this discussion. We will realign the grid, taking the inputs that have come in and send it across to you. We've not shared the complete grid. We just shared the 4 headings. We've not shared the complete grid with everybody, the idea of this M.A.D. was to share that with you, which I will do in the next few minutes.
So I'm saying at a macro level, whatever brand we are evaluating, we should look at growth or change in market share position or something like that also.
So we did not mention that, but it has been debated, and we will get back to you on that, and I think we will share it with everybody so that we can get their opinion. But yes, that is under consideration.
Because that brings in objectivity. Otherwise, we are judging then.
No, Sanjeev also very strongly was pushing that point, and we had a big debate, and we said, okay, let's keep it in abeyance at this point in time, but we'll come back to that. So we've not completely eliminated that. It's still in contention.
So that's
what. Anyone of Shushita or Ridhima or Rupali wants to make a point? No, I go to Vivek. Vivek,
Giraj,
yeah,
may I
please.
get in a word? Yeah. So sorry for joining the party late, but it's whatever I've heard is fascinating. I think these are some very cutting edge perspectives that we are looking at to evaluate brands in today's perspective. And I have a point to make in terms of that there are four parameters which are absolutely paramount. I mean, the way we've been looking at brands in our business and around ourselves, uh, I it's a bit of a rehash of what you would in early days in marketing refer to as 4 Ps, but this is probably going to be a different take on that. So there is people, passion, probity, and performance. I mean, that's something that, we've been looking at from the point of view of consumers' reaction towards a brand's identity, its outreach. And in the last year or so, we've seen that probity has become a very important aspect of a brand's persona. So somewhere, in the whole thing, if we can bring in an element which looks at, how ethical it has been or how associated or devoted to certain, aspects of a consumer-driven cause or a societal cause, that would probably be an important angle to look at as well. It might not have a direct bearing on, the business, but it does have a, major impact on the way the overall aura and the halo around the brand is, built today. So that's one of the points I would like to make. But by and large, I think it's important to look at all the current aspects and also how the evolution has been, and how quick the brand has been to adapt itself to the new point. As Sanjay said, and some of the other panelists have also said. So I'm pretty much in sync with what seems to be the drift here.
No, on that note, I would like to mention that Kia is again a great example of a brand being in sync, a brand that Vivek handles. And I think it's done a fabulous job worldwide, not just in India, where it's understood the pulse of what the consumer needs, adapted to make a product in that space, priced it damn well, and really cut through the market in blazing time. And I think that's where being in sync is about, agile marketing. It's about, innovation. It's about, proper price, ensuring that, the foundations of the product, the place, the marketing, the distribution, they're all in place. But on top of that, to layer it with a certain sense of, the new technology element into it, penetrate deep through digital. I think those are things which Kia makes a great example. And that was a brand that I thought I should talk about.
And, on a similar note, if I may just get 30 seconds more, Giraj.
Yeah.
There are certain brands which people had probably written off, and they're making a comeback as well. So, that could also be an element to evaluate. Two names come to my mind. From the automobile perspective itself. The other is Nissan. Too early to say if the brand has made a comeback, but what one is reading around in the media is that, yes, it's the rebirth of a company. And same can be said about the, Tata Motors, homegrown, or even for that matter, Mahindra and Mahindra as well. So, there are aspects which show that, the more you synchronize yourself, the greater are the chances of success and your acceptance going up. So, and all these three brands have kind of, navigated that part fairly well in the last, 10 months or so, if I may look at it that way.
No, fair. I think there's evidence there.
But it depends whether we are looking at short-term successes largely, or are we looking at a more enduring aspect?
What we are looking at, Vivek, what we are going to do is, because we're going to make it this an annual affair. So we would look at what evidence we have of the brands in the year 2020.
Right.
Say that this brand was in sync in that year, So we will look at so the evidence gathering is limited to 2020.
Okay. So this becomes like a baseline of sorts, which then we'll build upon in years to come.
We build upon it. Yeah. Yes. All right. So I'll try and share if this system allows me to share. Can you guys see my slide?
Yes, we can.
Finally, so it's working. So these were the four elements that we had picked up, and please respond. And Sanjeev, you can come in wherever you feel like. So as of now, and this is based, we had sent out a link to all of you and to all the guys who are there on the M.A.D. console. And this is what we've got. So under connection, we got understands TA aspiration, strong emotional connect, has nurtured the connect long-term, keeping the core emotion while responding to the changes. Under responsiveness, what we've got is evidence of robust listening mechanism, evidence of standing up and delivering customer promise, evidence of responding to customer changing needs, and evidence of taking care of consumers' implicit needs. Ashu, maybe here is the point that you make. We can actually include that. That's where, because innovation for what purpose? Innovation for the purpose of being in sync with the consumer changing needs. So we'll bring that in here, then aligned, we said co-opt the customer to build a brand story. Now that's where, Sanjay, your points comes in, where you say that, okay, the consumer has your back, that kind of a thing. That can come in here. Maybe we can sort of elaborate more here. Sanjay, are you there with me on this?
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
So presence across platforms and actively engage with consumers, displays sensitivity and takes stance on issues which are of concern to society at large, factors diversity. This is the point that Johan was making. So that's come in here. Then Chitra, the point that you were making, the C-level officers are active and display similar attributes to that of the brand. Now, what you said, Chitra, was that the C-level officers have to be active and, they should be active on social media interacting. But somewhere we got inputs which says that, okay, they cannot be standalone, brands in their own right. They have to somewhere be in sync. So they have to display similar attributes to that of the brand. That is where it becomes in sync. And then purpose was harmonizing with society, values that are dear to customers, part of the brand DNA, engages in uplifting weaker sections of society. I mean, that came also very strongly, and especially with the council members. Then another interesting point that came in was promotes art, culture, education, etc. without commercialization. We will have to really dig deep to get evidence on this, but this came in very strongly. Is concerned about environment and makes conscious effort to improve it. So this is how it came across. Of course, we will now filter it and look at all the inputs that come in, especially Nari's graphic that was shown. Nari will have to look at trust somewhere in big time in this. Maybe we'll have to sort of elaborate on trust and look at what evidence do we pick up that exemplifies trust. Agility is, of course, we'll be looking at. I think a large part of responsiveness is about agility. Innovation that Ashu said has to be looked in. So please speak up, guys. I think we have next 10 minutes if you guys can react to this.
What about trend setting? I mean, this is like understanding a need and developing something, but there are brands who create needs.
Yeah, I think that's a valid point that you said, Ashu. Even I am of the same opinion, but perhaps because we were looking at it for 2020, there are not much evidences of brands which have done anything to create need in that year, per se. Because largely, if you look at 2020, people have been responding. Maybe 2021, it might just become a very important factor. I'm a big believer and a big fan of wanting to drive customers instead of being customer driven. You are market driving.
Yeah.
Maybe this year,
trust can be built in that nurtured the connect long term. Maybe trust can be built in under connection.
Fair. We will look at that. Guys, you're making notes, Shubhi and Prajay, I hope you're making notes of this. We will obviously, we have a recording, so we will come back to you.
Yeah.
Lloyd, your reactions. Sanjeev, you want to say something?
Yeah. I was saying that when we talk of evidence taking care of customers' implicit need, I think innovation, which is path breaking or different, sort of follows here. So that point needs to be sort of elaborated here, I think, because unless you understand the implicit need, then how can you drive innovation? Yeah.
Lloyd, your take on
this seems pretty comprehensive to me, and my point is, want to shoot for the moon, but I think this, in a sense, gathers almost all the points that we brought out here together. And anybody else has any other input, I think we can shoot a mail to Sanjeev and you take it forward. But for me, this kind of broadly answers most of the points that have been raised today.
Yeah, but I think what we'll do is we'll even tweak it further based on the inputs that we've got here. So like for example, the trust thing has to sort of it can't be perhaps trust cannot be a inference of one of the points. It has to be a key point there itself. And yeah, Vivek, you're saying something.
Giraj, what's going to happen is, see, a lot of these would become subsets of what are already here. And I tend to agree with what Lloyd just said. It's fairly comprehensive. And it's a very nice, I would say, mix of current, a bit of legacy, and what the future holds. So I think all these three aspects are very well reflected in this grid. And rest, I guess, as we go along, there will be a certain amount of, subsets that might emerge. But for now, I think this is fairly comprehensive. and we should be able to do a fair amount of justice to a brand's perspectives, purely from our lens as well.
Shekhar, you want to say something?
No, it's okay. I feel that of these four attributes, I mean, brand purpose could be, if you have a weighted average for each of these, that might perhaps constitute this grid better. If you could have weighted averages as to what would be weightier than the other.
Oh,
I mean,
okay, interesting point. Very interesting.
Because I feel that brand purpose and connection could be critical, because those are areas that might require greater
so then,
weightages.
Shekhar, if everybody agrees, then what we'll do is we will go back and put that in Google Sheets and send it out to you, all the guys who are present here, and get your weightages and then do an average. Lloyd, is that all right?
Perfect. Sounds good.
Good idea. Good idea.
Yeah,
We'll do that.
the weightage
And very democratic as well.
Johan, your reactions?
Great. I think it's very comprehensive. I would just say the weightage part is very important. I don't know if they can all have the same importance. For example, purpose, some of the pieces in purpose, we don't know if they can all be apples and apples. But apart from that, I think it's very comprehensive and covers most of the points. At least for 2020, I think it's very apt.
Okay. So we will do this. Nari Sahab, anything you want to add on to this? You'll have to unmute. Nari, you'll have to unmute.
One is that I don't see this as the way the brand is. It's in sync is how it has responded to changes. So there is a certain dynamic kind of a thing in my mind when I see the word in sync. Historically, the brand has been in sync. That's why it has survived. That is why it has grown. So growth can be a clear substitute for all these factors together. Otherwise it won't grow. But the fact is that when they are challenged by changing context, when they are challenged by changing consumer requirements, and changing technological opportunities, are they in sync is the issue. So it is the changes and the response to changes that I would want to capture.
Yeah, the action-reaction bit, the action and the reaction bit, right, Manari?
And therefore, to me, trust becomes super important, because you need to trust the guy finally on what the guy is really doing. Because what he has done in the past 100 years has no relevance starting now with newer information, newer news.
Nari, just to correct there, I mean, correct the perspective there, that we are only looking at evidence of what has happened in 2020. We are not looking at what they've done in the years earlier.
That's even more important. That only strengthens my case. You're only looking at 2020. So therefore, the changes that impinged on them in 2020 and the way they responded to those challenges, how in sync have they been, is how I am mentally seeing it.
Okay. No, I think we will fine tune this, and
I would certainly add digital. I would certainly add trust. I would certainly put community rather than mere connection.
No, but if you look at digital, so when we have out of the 15 categories, there are 6 categories which are purely digital categories. So when you evaluate, and these are brands which have either a significant presence on digital platforms or are only there on digital. So when you evaluate them,
let me think about this. Let me think about it. But meanwhile, I would say that to me, regardless of whether they are digital first born guys like an Ola or an Uber, or whether they are cement guys who are now trying to transform themselves, I think we need a set of evidence on do they understand the rhythms of what digital offers, both as an opportunity and what it offers to create newer ways of connection, create newer business models, create newer ways of engaging with the consumer, etc. And are they able to really do that? So that's the real question. So in ITC, that did eChowpal, to me is a great example to be celebrated. While an Ola, we need to look for something comparable to Ola, who are born in the digital space. What are they doing in terms of something equal?
Okay. Sandeep sir.
Yes, sir. No, that I'm at sync with all the gurus here.
My God. All right. Harish, if you're still there, your reactions? Chitra, if you're there.
Yeah. Hi, can you hear?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm also pretty good with this. This is a very clean and neat grid, and I think it captures everything.
Okay. Harish, if you're there, you can comment. Sanjay, something you want to add?
No, I think it's pretty good as it is, and I think maybe we should all give it one look again when you share that sheet, and something might just come up. We'll share it, but as of now, I think pretty much in sync.
Okay.
No issues at all.
Okay. Wonderful. So I think that is it. Thank you so much, everyone. Wonderful session.
I got a bit distracted, maybe of interest to a few people in this group, to see a news that 2 terrorists were apprehended in Delhi today, who apparently were sent on a brief to assassinate somebody we know. Many of us know Sushil Pandit.
Oh, really?
Okay.
Oh,
I heard the news.
I read the news. Kashmiri. Yeah, I read
but I
Kashmiri.
didn't know about
There was
Sushil.
no name given in that. Yeah, where did you hear the name?
No, they've given the names. The name is, one is Sukhvinder Singh, and another is Lakhan Singh or something.
Okay. No, Sushil's name came up when? Because I saw this news in the morning.
It just now came up.
And may we know who is Sushil Pandit?
Sushil was earlier with contract advertising. He's now a very outspoken, voice for the Kashmiri Pandits.
Okay. He was also the founder, co-founder of Exchange for Media.
Of Exchange for Media as well. So I know him since about 30 years, since contract days. So, but strange. And in fact, on the aside, another fairly sad news was the demise of another very old advertising hand, Mr. Shobhan Chaudhary.
Oh, Shobhan.
Shobhan died yesterday, and that was quite sad. So we all work together, and I think now is the time when you get in an age where you see a lot of your colleagues just dropping by, and then you realize that
What happened to Shobhan?
Shobhan was unwell for a while, and he had cancer. Lately, he was detected with stage 4 pancreas cancer. But he also had COVID, and then he had earlier issues with his lungs, and so I mean he's been in and out of hospitals for a while. But
he was a smoker that much.
Oh yeah, he was a smoker. But what a brilliant mind he was. I worked fairly closely with him, and he was like a genius. Who probably didn't get his due in advertising, but he became a great author, and he wrote this fabulous book called The Competent Authority, which was humorous as hell. And but anyway. And Sandeep, it was great to see you on Money 9. I saw the entire Bangla piece. It was a channel that I just launched. So, But particularly, interesting for me to see a friendly face on a channel that you just launched about, a few weeks back. So,
no, I think Money 9 is getting a lot of traction in Calcutta.
Yes,
in Bengal,
it is.
It's getting a lot of traction.
Right. They're coming up in, I think, 8 languages now, 7 or 8 languages. So doing fairly well. Good team.
All right.
Anyway, we'll catch up on that. Thank you.
So thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Sanjeev, last words from you, like always.
I think it's been a very nice discussion.
Remove this slide, I think, so that we can see everyone.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. Yeah. So it's a very nice discussion. I think there's a lot of depth which is there. There are lots of points I have noted down, but we'll try and incorporate as many points as possible. But this is the first year. We just don't want to go, get lost into getting too much data which we can't sort of handle. And I think this is going to make it very, very nice. The discussion, I think we are going to have a very good criteria. So thank you all. Thank you so much.
And the good part is, the best part is that the entire flag comes on Lloyd. He's the head of the jury and on the MAD council in the jury. So anything goes wrong, he'll say, "Arey, catch Vivek, catch Lloyd, catch Sandeep, catch Sanjay, catch Ashu."
So you're not going to see, you're not going to see Giraj and me anywhere. Yeah. So all the best, guys.
All the best, guys.
Thank you. Logged off before we could take the customary group screenshot.
Okay, I'm there on video. Yeah.
Harish, if you're there, please put on your camera.
The customary screenshot is required, no?
Yeah.
As Nani said, everything has to be evidence-based.
Yeah.
Chalo, hi. Say hi.
Hi.
Yeah.
Bye.
So, yeah,
Thank you.
You're asking me something, Giraj.
No, I wasn't. I was just saying hi.
Okay, so then we will look to see to take.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Pleasure.
much.
Thank you, everyone.
Everybody, bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.